Okay, group, this is our day one practice, our parallel line proofs. We always write our given down first. So in this case, we are given that K is parallel to M. So that's really, really important for us, because if we didn't have parallel lines, then we would not have alternate angles, corresponding angles, same side, all of those different types of angles. So now that we have parallel lines, that allows us to use all those different angle properties. So the next thing that we are going to do is go ahead and prove that angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. So this is our goal, right, that angle 4 and angle 6 are congruent. And so we could use some different scenarios here. We're going to go ahead and use corresponding angles. So if we look at, for example, angles 4 and 8. Angles 4 and 8 are corresponding angles. So we can say that they are congruent because if you look back to, and I'm trying to remember which page it was on, the corresponding angles postulate on page 1. It allows us to say that corresponding angles are congruent. So that can be true. And then we'll relate also angle 8 and angle 6 because they are vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are congruent. And then lastly, we're going to use the transitive property because if 4 is congruent to 8 and 8 is congruent to 6, that means 4 is also congruent to angle 6. So that would be the transitive property. Okay, number 2. So number 2, obviously we're going to go ahead and put our given first. And we are given that K is parallel to M. And we're trying to prove that angles 2 and 8 are congruent. And 2 and 8 are alternate exterior angles. We do know that. However, we're going to use some different ideas here. So, for this particular question, we are given different statements that we can choose from. So if we're trying to relate 2 and 8 together, we're going to need to use either, let's see, 2 and 4 might be an option. Those are vertical. Let's see, 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are vertical. 4 and 8 are corresponding. So there we go. We have 4 and 8, 2 and 4, and then that would relate us to 2 and 8. So, beautiful. So we'll say angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. We'll use that statement. And 2 and 4 are vertical angles. So we're going to use the vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so 2 and 4, and now we will use 4 and 8. And 4 and 8 are corresponding angles. And then that leads us to 2 and 8 because of that transitive property. Okay, let's take a look at number 3. Okay, this one again, we are given options, which is really nice. So the given is that R is parallel to S and T is parallel to U. And we're trying to prove that 4 and 10 are congruent. So on this one, in particular, let's look and see what we have. So we want to start with maybe 4. We do see this option down here of 4 and 8. 4 and 8 are corresponding angles, so if we look down here, that's an option. So we could do that first. Oops. Very sure we give it in there. We could do that as our first option. So if we did 4 and 8, then we'd have to relate 8 to 10, and that's an option here. And angles 8 and 10 are alternate interior angles, and that is also an option here. So since we can do that, we're good to go. So we're going to go ahead and relate 4 and 8 first. And again, angles 4 and 8 are corresponding angles. Okay, so then if we do 4 and 8, our only other option is 8 and 10, because that's what we're working with there. 8 and 10 are alternate interior angles. Okay, and then because 4 is congruent to 8, 8 is congruent to 10, that means angle 4 can also be congruent to 10 because of the transitive property. Okay, and last is number 4. Okay. So here we already have our given filled in for us. We're trying to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 11. So let's start at 1. What can we relate 1 to? Well, the only one that we see on here is 1 and 5. 1 and 5 here are corresponding angles. So if we decided to do that, we would have to relate 5 to 11. And here we see 5 and 11. So we could use that, but 5 and 11 are alternate exteriors, and that's also here. So that's wonderful. So we'll go ahead and start with angle 1, congruent to angle 5, and then angle 5 congruent to angle 11, so then we can say 1 and 11 are congruent. So 1 and 5, those are corresponding. Um, 5 and 11 are alternate exterior. So that would leave us with the transitive property.